everyone, how you doing today? My name's Kirsty, aka Beth Bookish, and welcome to the Tortured Emo Boy Department. What is the Tortured Emo Boy Department, I hear you ask? Well, I am here to clear this up for you. We've all read them, we all mostly love them, and then we think these boys should be in therapy and so should we for loving them so much. But these are the characters that crop up in books time and time again you know you're not supposed to like. Or they're not necessarily built to be a good guy, but you know, we can't help but love them anyway. These are the solemn guys. They've been through untold levels of trauma. They've turned themselves into absolute dickbags because anything but let ourselves feel the slightest shred of emotion. They're those guys where they've just been through so much and it's turned them into this little kind of me against the world, stay away from me, I'm dangerous and you shouldn't be near me emo type. And we love them. We gobble that shit up. Probably because we all need therapy just as much as these characters, but that is beside the point. Also, a lot of Tortured Emo Boys tend to be the tall, dark and handsome type. You know, the ones with the brown hair and, you know, the goody-goody two-shoes good boy is the blonde and the bad boy is always the brunette. Not always, but majority of the time. So a lot of these are going to be brunettes. We have a type. So I've got a big stack of books with these characters. You may classify the Tortured Emo Boy slightly differently to me. For me, the criteria is absolutely that they have to have gone through a lot of trauma. They have closed themselves off like emotionally and struggle to have relationships, or they have built themselves into a villain or a complete douche in order to sort of protect themselves, whereas underneath all of that is actually a really good guy. And so they might do dodgy things, they might destroy the world or not give a shit about who they hurt in the process, but ultimately they do have good intentions in mind and they're not there to, you know, just fuck shit up for the sake of it. So yeah, this is my stack of Tortured Emo Boys. I have only picked out physical books. I could probably have more that I can come up with. But without further ado, we're going to get into it. We are starting very strong with a very well-known, very classic Kaz from Six of Crows. Can this list get any more tortured? Can this list get any more emo? It can, and it does. But he's definitely up there in that top. So Kaz from Six of Crows is a very textbook definition of has gone through a ton of trauma, has resulted in him having different psychological issues, and as a result he has turned himself into a ruthless shark who keeps everyone at arm's length because he's scared to let anyone in to get hurt again, and he does bad shit. But ultimately he just wants to protect his people and he just wants to make the world a better place. He's not afraid to do bad stuff to do it. Tortured Emo Boy. Then we got a bit of a stretchy kind of one, but I wanted to include him anyway because it's from one of my all-time favourite series, and that is Jericho Barons from the Fever series by Karen Marie Moning, who is an absolute arsehole. I'm not even going to deny it. He inherently and at his core is not like a super fluffy cinnamon roll. He is badass, he is ruthless. But when you learn his backstory and you understand what led him to become that way, suddenly his motives become far more admirable and you start to hate him a little less and you realise that he actually does qualify as being a certified tortured emo boy because just his backstory is very traumatic. Another one that was kind of a bit of an oddball, but we have it Nimona and we have Lord Blackheart, who is the central villain in this series, and is another one where once you learn his backstory you realise that he actually started out as a really lovely, nice guy, and it's society and everyone's perception of him that has turned him into the villain that he is. And it's just such a beautiful story to watch unfold and to see him grow through that. Just perfect. Not all of these are going to be fantasy. We do actually have I think, one contemporary. Yes, I have one contemporary and the rest are all fantasy or manga. More contemporary authors, please write more Tortured Emo Boys that aren't wet rags like Twisted Lies. But anyway, Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. I think Luke is certified Tortured Emo Boy. He's had a bit of a messed up background. He's dabbled in drugs and alcohol and things like that. He's quite twisted up at the start of this book. He takes things very heavily. He very heavily criticizes himself. He's gone through some issues with like parental abandonment and things like that, and as a result he's just kind of embraced this wild child bad boy kind of reputation, because he's like, well, fuck it, I might as well be. But we see more vulnerability to him throughout this book that is just wonderful. And I think he was a very well written character, but definitely falls under the daddy issues, tortured emo boy. I think he qualifies. Next up we have a trio of characters from the same series. Probably no shock that I'm including this series, and it's probably a shock that it's taken so long to get to, but we have the Psy Changeling series by Nalini Singh. We have Judd Lauren, we have Vasik Zen, and we have Caleb Krychek. Judd Lauren, his powers are highly destructive. Without the sort of pain barriers that are in place to kind of keep them at bay, he would lose control and potentially kill everyone he loves. Therefore, he is kind of tortured emo in that he wants to embrace having emotions and feelings, but he also is very aware that if he does embrace that, he runs the risk of destroying everyone and everything he cares about. And so he's very tortured emo over that, and he makes questionable decisions and says questionable things to his potential mate to protect her, and it's like, I get you're protecting her, but I want to smack you. For Vasik Zen, he grew up like in the system, same as Judd. He was trained to be an Arrow, who are kind of like the assassin slash cleanup crew for the Psy. And, you know, he's been made to do some very dark, dirty things. He's been trained from a young age to tolerate pain. Like, they would quite often do things like break his bones as a child to make him get used to pain. And, you know, the ways that they used to train the children and the fact that they physically drugged them to keep them in check. He's definitely a tortured emo boy, but oh my god, is he a cinnamon roll. And there is the cutest little dog called Rabbit in this. Just, oh, his interactions with Rabbit throughout this book had me in tears. And then the absolute emoist of emo boys has to go to Caleb Krychek, and anyone that says otherwise is just plain wrong, because this guy not only has been raised by a serial killer, and not only has got very dark, twisty thoughts in his own self. The love of his life went missing for years, and he has spent years trying to find her. He built a fortress in the isolated wilds of Russia in order to keep everyone away from him and be able to protect her. He is the absolute baddest and most cutthroat ruthless. Like, he will not even hesitate to kill you if you put any threat to the love of his life. But he also has so many mental scars, and a lot of the book, she helps him to kind of acknowledge those, if not work through them, and start to overcome those feelings and thoughts. A double whammy in one book for this, actually a triple, quadruple. I'm gonna go with a triple whammy for this one, and we have Full Metal Alchemist, because not only the Elric brothers, Edward and Alphonse, so Ed and Al, we also have Scar, who is actually the one that I'm going to focus on the most, because yes, Ed and Al have gone through a lot of trauma. I mean, they tried to bring their mother back to life, it went horribly wrong, and both of them nearly died. Kind of tells you how tortured and emo those guys are. But I would say that despite that, they both still have a pretty positive outlook on life. We have the odd blip where one of them will show some sort of mental health instability there and show that they're struggling, but on the whole, they they have things that they want to look forward to. They have things that keep them going. Scar has lost everything. This guy was just on an absolute murder rampage. His entire, not even just his family, his entire nation was torn to shreds in this civil war. He was almost killed and woke up to find his brother's arm had been attached to him, and he now had these abilities, but all those abilities allowed him to do were destroy everything and break everything down. And so he goes, hey, this is a pretty good thing. I'm going to take like revenge for my people, and I'm going to destroy every alchemist that was involved in that civil war. And any state alchemist I come across is going to be killed. And, you know, his arc and his story, I think, is one of the most compelling and one of the most intricate in any series I've ever read. And I loved his development and how his story goes. But definitely, like, Tortured Emo Boy, he absolutely is. Especially when you break down that all of that rage and anger is all linked to the trauma that he's gone through. Up next, we have another double whammy. I mean, again, this one could actually apply to almost all of them, but I'm going to go with two in particular. They have two different flavours of what I consider to be the Tortured Emo Boy, and that is Ronan and Adam from the Raven Cycle. Ronan is the angry, will fight anyone, sort of, you know, chihuahua that is just hyper aggressive for no real apparent reason when you first look at them. And he's just always ready to go and is always ready to just fly off the handle at any given time. While Adam has more of a melancholic kind of Tortured Emo Boy. He withdraws into himself a lot. He is very introverted with his emoism, but it makes him come across as being quite sort of grumpy and solemn and self-deprecating quite a lot of the time. They both have their traumas. Adam comes from a very physically abusive family and is treated like absolute crap by his parents. Ronan has gone through a lot of sort of grief and trauma, and there are some other things going on in his life that, again, I'm not going to say because spoilers, you don't really find out until the end of the first book, beginning of the second book, so not really going to tell you that. But those also factor into that sort of anger and that, and when you realise again with him that his anger stems more from pain and hurt than actual rage, he suddenly becomes this incredibly multi-layered character. So yeah, I did also think Noah could kind of go in there, but his is a whole different reason altogether that I cannot talk about, again, because massive spoilers. But, you know, certainly those two, I would say, are the key standout Tortured Emo Boys in this story. And they're both just so beautiful to read. Our next one is My Hero Academia, and again, I have got two that I consider for this. The first one is our boy Shoto Todoroki, aka Icy Hot, aka a character that everyone else seems to love. I find him fine, I like him, but he's not like my favourite. He has an abusive father. He has a mother who in his youth was pushed to breaking point by his father and ended up physically scarring him in an incident that happened when he was a child. And so obviously there's a lot of him coming to terms with his background and overcoming some mental blocks that he has in regards to those, especially with his powers, because he's always had this thing of, I don't want to be like my father, I don't want to acknowledge that I'm his son because of all of this. And throughout the series he starts to overcome a lot of that. But the other one is one of my favourite characters. He's probably in my top 3 favourite characters for the entire series, and that is, of course, Hawks. I know a lot of people don't like him, but I absolutely love him. He, again, his father, we find out, was a serial killer, and so he's always grown up with this like negative household, this black cloud hanging over him. Everyone's always assumed that he will never amass to anything. He gets taken in by the Heroes Association very early, and they kind of try to groom him into the perfect hero. As a result, at the age of 22, he becomes the youngest hero in history to have his own agency, and he has fought so hard to, like, no one knows his real identity, no one knows his real background outside of a very tiny number of people in the agency. There's a storyline where he ends up kind of involved with the League of Villains. And that storyline, we get to see a different side of him, and we get to see more of how broken he actually is, and that this kind of jovial, carefree, doesn't really care guy who's just kind of, you know, so chill, laid back, takes a real calm approach to everything. You realise that underneath all of that, there is a very tortured and broken young man. And oh my god, I love his story so much. And like I said, he is in my top 3 characters of this series. I've just looked at the time and I've just seen that this video is almost 20 minutes long already, and from what I can think of, I don't think I'm going to have a lot of editing down that I'm going to need to do for this. So I've decided I am going to make this a 2-part series. I do still have this stack of books right here, and I can probably think of a few more to add into this. So I will definitely come back with a part 2 for this, and there are some pretty awesome names still to come. Please let me know in the comments if you've read any of these. Do you agree, or do you think I may have missed someone from any of these series who qualifies? I did almost pick Roy Mustang for Full Metal Alchemist as well, but then I thought, I don't think he quite fits, because he did have a pretty decent history, and most of his trauma and the stuff that turns him into a kind of tortured emo boy happens through the series. It wasn't that he started as one. So I think he's like an honourable mention, but not quite a full-blown tortured emo boy. But yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you're excited for part 2 of this. In the meantime, I hope you're all good, I hope you're staying safe, and I will see you on the next one. Bye!